When we're training in the gym, we're all interested in getting better, and in particular, we're interested in getting stronger. And one of the key ways that we can get stronger is to pay attention to how quickly we're able to do these movements. And I'm not talking about trying to do everything super duper quickly, but what I'm talking about is maintaining high loads and paying attention to when your velocity drops off. Over the last few years, velocity-based training has become the focus of a lot of research. And basically what we're seeing is that as an athlete's speed slows down in the second or third or fourth or fifth repetition, that is when we start to change energy systems, we start to change the way that we're stimulating those muscles, and we start to see a decline in the amount of high quality repetitions that an athlete is able to put out. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're doing pull-ups and you do 1 and 2 and 3 and you're nice and strong and crisp and clean. And then as you get closer and closer to your limit, and you get to 6 and 7 and 8, you start to slow down. You start to really have to strain for it. And pretty soon you're kicking and flailing just to get your head over the bar. At that point, we've actually left that strength and power energy system, and we're starting to strain against this lactate or glycolytic energy system. When we finish that set, we may be breathing hard and pumped and sweating. And the important thing to know there is that those are not appropriate overloads for optimum strength training. And so with velocity-based training, we pay attention to how slow our movement speed becomes. And as movement speed drops off, the current research is kind of saying 25 to 35%. That's when we stop that set. Now, if I had planned to do 5 sets of 5 and I only got to 3 or 4, it doesn't mean that I'm not good. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have to do a shorter session. I can still do more repetitions. I just do them in subsequent sets. So instead of doing 5 sets of 5 for a total of 25 reps, I might do 2 sets of 5 and then a set of 4 and then a set of 3, another set of 3, and then maybe another set or 2 that are still at high velocity and at high intensity, but not with that fatigue that comes after velocity loss. So in the weight room, there's a lot of devices you can use. You can use a wearable, you can use accelerometers, you can use all kinds of tools to calculate your velocity. But I think it's important that we look at the principle rather than getting too deep into the weeds of gear. We don't need to focus on this with every single exercise, every single movement. The most important part is to take your key big movements, squats, bench press, deadlift, those kinds of things, and to make sure that when you start to slow down toward the end of any given set, you stop the set. Over time, you'll start to see yourself able to maintain velocity a little better in each of these exercises. A really good way of testing this is to just simply get down on the floor and try to do some push-ups and try to keep a regular tempo. And you start off and you'll do 3 or 4 or 5 and they'll all be at this nice clean tempo. And then inevitably they're going to start to slow down. And then inevitably you'll get to the point that they actually stop mid-movement. Another way of looking at this is setting a goal of doing 50 pull-ups in a fixed amount of time. And the first time you go to do it, I want you to totally max out and maybe you get 12. And then see how long it takes before you can do the next set and do as many as you can, and see how long it takes before you can do the next set and do as many as you can. It may take you all afternoon. If instead you do 3 pull-ups, rest briefly, do 3 more pull-ups, rest briefly, you'll probably get to that 50 fairly quickly. And that is this indication of maintaining this high power energy system and resting enough between. The real take home is the more high quality strength and power work that we're able to do, the faster we'll get strong and powerful. Now, it's important to consider the idea of velocity loss when we're doing our board sessions or when we're campusing or when we're doing any climbing. Yes, of course, climbing is about going into those deep levels of fatigue sometimes and powering through even though we're really, really tired. But when we want to develop maximum strength or power, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to all the factors we can in order to improve. And so if you're in the middle of a board session and you're starting to see your speed slow down and you don't quite have that snap, I think it's really important to go, ooh, I'm getting close to the end here. The first intervention when you start to feel a little fatigue like that should probably be just to rest a little bit more between sets. If you're resting 5 or 8 or even 10 minutes between problems and you've still got no snappiness, I think you're done with the session. And if we can have the discipline when we're trying to develop strength and power to stop when velocity slows, we're going to see an improvement in our ability to gain strength. A key takeaway here is to not do everything with velocity-based training principles in mind. Do a few exercises and then go ahead and do the rest of your workout. Eventually, you will build the habit of paying attention to being able to stay nice and fast and crisp on these. Remember, these principles don't apply to endurance activities. They're only for strength and power. If you're doing circuits, if you're doing an endurance day, don't worry about paying attention to your velocity. It's also important to not equate this with just doing stuff really fast. You need to be loading heavily, and then you need to be trying to maintain velocity. We aren't looking at just trying to jump around the gym and sprint between exercises. That's not what I'm talking about here. Try this with only 1 or 2 exercises at first. I want you to get used to the idea of stopping when velocity slows. Note when your velocity changes. This will be way before failure. You're going to just notice yourself start to slow down, and you probably are going to feel like you have a few reps left. And that's when we want to stop. Remember that this is only for strength and power training. It's not for endurance training. And finally, pay attention to performance, not just fatigue. One of the big traps of training is looking at fatigue or sweat or soreness as a marker of good exercise. The really important thing here is, are my numbers progressing? Am I seeing better performance set to set, rep to rep in the gym? Those are the things we're looking for, and velocity-based training is an easy to implement tool that's going to help us all get a little bit stronger.